Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to have Blair Anderson on talking about metalsmithing. Thursdays are oftentimes our look at things that aren't necessarily all digital, but she's kind of mixing digital with metalsmithing. So we're going to see a little bit of that in the second hour. Tomorrow, we'll talk about office hours. We're going to talk about office hours and give you an update where we are. We're so close to going live with the new Office Hours 2.0. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. And then on Saturday, we have education, of course, for the second and third hour. And then on the fourth hour, that's not on YouTube, but on the fourth hour, we'll have Laura Thompson, and she's going to talk about accessibility in the classroom. And then Sunday, of course, is when you can ask more questions about office hours and why are we doing this, and more philosophical discussions that are kind of fun. So that's what we have coming up. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And our first one this morning comes from Christian Pryor Mamulan in Wolfsburg, Germany. And he says, could the mic checks be streamed to YouTube once at some point or put there afterwards as an extra video? It's so educating and no layperson can imagine the process.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. I mean, a lot of people are interested in what our mic chains are. Like mine, lower Fenwick is there. I was thinking maybe we could do it, just delay the mic check until just before or while we're recording, but then it defeats the purpose of doing a mic check before you're recording. So as a separate piece, yeah, we could do that anytime.
Go ahead, Sky.
I would recommend on a Tuesday. Seems that's our time when we talk about technology and technique. And what I'm grateful for is that this is being seen as an educational process that you're learning from, because this is the best show and tell of a system that is, again, it's variable to everybody's circumstance. So you can kind of try before you buy. So I vote to do it on a Tuesday. And you'll also be introduced to ruthless reviews if that happens.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you talked at some point about doing training things. It'd be fun to write a mic check with all the potential problems put in there so people can see how we solve them all, because every day there is one or two problems. Aggregate, there's probably 30 problems that come up consistently with people's setups, and that would be a very powerful training thing to let them see how we troubleshoot all of those.
I think it'd be fun to have some kind of, either we do it locally for each one of us, or we do it in our switcher with the graphics of kind of an updated version of the lower Fenwick, where we kind of, it animates as each person does it, so that you can get, like, maybe when they say I'm starting with a Heil PR40, one shows up next to them and it has like a price, what it looks like, and then have it zing down to the bottom, and then have another one appear next to them. I'm going into a sound devices, whatever, and have it up there and then pop down to the corner, and have each one do that. And that would be a great one to be as the one that we send out. It'd be kind of a fun thing to watch in general. So let's think about how that might work. I think that there's a way we could probably do this. Like, if people just type in what they're going to say beforehand, it could be something that we did with the graphic system, so SPX could probably have it like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go here. Probably set up a set of rules so that all you have to do is tell us what it is ahead of time, and it'll do what it needs to do as you say it. Probably even get to a point where someone could just hit a button. Like, if we just know everybody's stuff, they just hit the button for each piece. So that could make it a lot of fun too. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and this morning he says, do you see any place for AM radio in an age where mobile apps and streaming content have taken over many of its use cases?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's a good question to ask because we have a bunch of AM radio guys here, but AM radio, as you know it now, no. What they're doing with AM radios, because it does not have the penetration that it used to order listeners. In fact, the land that most AM towers and transmitters sit on is probably worth more than the AM radio station. But what they're doing is that the FCC has passed legislation that allows AM radio stations to pick up a translator, which is an FM or lower powered FM station, to cover their signal. But that's just a stopgap. What really needs to happen is for AM to go all digital. And that's the only way to utilize that space or another space to accomplish the same thing. I think it's a vital part of our broadcast spectrum and service, but it is like MySpace for AM. It just ain't going to be there.
Go ahead, Bill.
So the original AM process was transmitters on a particular band. They added FM later, but they are different in this respect. AM hugs the earth and can bounce off the ionosphere. And so an AM radio signal can reach the other side of the world through that ionic bounce thing. So the coverage area can be massively wider. FM is generally limited to a city or an area. And so AM is far more penetrative. If we ever get into a circumstance where there's some ugly electromagnetic pulse or something like that, and it takes our computers down, technologies like AM radio that can transmit for long distances may turn out to be an emergency case use. I'm not saying there's an apocalypse coming. I'm just saying that's the technical reason why AM had such reach. And you see all those clear channel AM stations that had massive audiences. It's gone away because people have moved from radio to all these digital things. But in lieu of digital, it's still a viable technology for talking to the world.
12% a decade, by the way, just in case you're wondering what the chances are of a massive CME impact. 12% a decade. Anyway, so but I think that AM's probably got some legs still left on it. There's a lot of people still listening to it. So there's, in the area of talk radio, in the area of a lot of other things, there's still, it's hard because it's spread out among so many people, but there are still a fair bit of it. So it's probably got legs for another at least 5 or 10 years. But I do think that if they don't make the changes that Mitchell was talking to and everything else, I think that they probably start to wander off. I thought the digital, aren't they already moving to digital, Mitchell? Isn't that already
They haven't
happening?
established. They haven't established a system. There's a lot of them out there that are being tested, but a repack and fully digital is the future, because the other problem with AM is that the spectrum, as you listen to it, has got more and more things that are making noise and interfering with it. So it doesn't matter that they have skip or other things going for them. It's just hard to listen to.
I feel like we were talking about digital when I was a program director 30 some years ago. There was like a conversation about digital, but it still hasn't really.
No, they can't decide on a system. It's like AM stereo. It's just bouncing around.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Next one comes from Simon Ray in Shrewsbury, UK. What would be a good entry-level camera for use in an SDI workflow? Looking for lower cost with reasonable image quality, primary use would be wide or full shots for coverage rather than close-up. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, the problem entry level with SDI is sort of a oxymoron there, because when you want a low cost, inexpensive camera for doing stuff, I use the Sony Z1 E10, and this one happens to have a small rig cage on it. But just overall, great pictures. The only downside is it's HDMI out, and then you got to convert it over. So that kind of messes with your SDI workflow idea. But this camera with a lens that'll do exactly what you're asking for. It could go for about $800.
Go ahead, Jason.
Hard to beat a micro studio camera, but they're getting a little bit long in the tooth. The only thing that I would suggest is I'd say a 4K or a 6K with the camera control provided by a converter, because you don't want to have to buy it twice.
Yeah, for really entry level, the other things to look for are you can get smaller ones like a Marshall. Marshall makes lots of little cameras that if you're looking for a little wide one, or if you're looking for an overhead, Marshall makes some great little POV cameras that you can use. And they're in the $400, $500, $600 range. Another one that I've been looking at, I haven't actually used, but it looks interesting as far as an option is from thorbroadcast.com. They have a variety of ones that have HDMI, SDI, and some version of IP coming out of the back of them. And they kind of look like a webcam build as well. 1/2.8, so it's not a great chip, but it is something that I'm kind of interested in testing for exactly this kind of purpose. It could be just a really nice webcam. They make some PTZs as well. And then finally, to what Mitchell was kind of talking to, you can convert something that has an HDMI out back to SDI. And so now you're getting into all the Sony, the A series, the 5100s and the 6000s and the 6400s. Those you can pick up on eBay oftentimes for $300 or $400, and then put an SDI converter on them for another another $50 or $100. And so then under $500, you have an SDI camera that probably has a lot more legs than what you're going to buy all in one. Next question.
Mitchell Hill is up next from Wilmington, Delaware, and he says, what's the best all-around lav or lavalier microphone?
Go ahead, Jason.
I love the DPA Discrete 6060. It's pretty hard to beat.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
So for me, I'm going to do a Mickey here and go. It depends. It depends on what you're looking for. Back when I used to use them all the time, I had two different sets of lavs. I had a set of Sony ECM 44s and a set of ECM 77s. And I would pull it out depending on what I found when I got to the location. If the location was at all noisy, I would stay away from the 77 because it had so much reach and clarity that background noises would get enhanced. The 44, on the other hand, would really suppress those background noise and had much tighter pattern, even though they're both omnis. However, if I was out in the field and I was intercutting with a high quality shotgun mic, the 77 sound almost exactly identical to some of the Shep's overhead mics that we were using. So it's these little things that determine what is the best in a particular circumstance. And I hate to say it, but there's not a one solution overall. If I was looking for the most flexible, I might go with a Tram because their mounting clips accessories are unbelievable. The DPAs are fabulous. The Cause 11s are great. There's a lot of really good microphones. It just depends on what you want to buy into, get them terminated correctly for your wireless packs. Make sure they have XLR adapters if you ever want to use them non-wirelessly. But these good lav microphones are amazing technology these days.
Yeah, I think that I'm pretty much in the same boat. But I think the one that we probably used the most is the Shure Twinplex TL47s is a lot of what we used. But we've also had a lot of the DPA 6060s and the Sanken COS 11s. And those are all great. The Sanken, to Bill's point, picks up everything in the room. So you really have to have a quiet room for the Sanken to actually work. In a high, when you're dealing with speakers and open speakers and so on and so forth, then you start talking about the WLM 185s. Those are going to be, those are highly directional. So those are not omnis. In general, you want omnis as an all around, but sometimes you have to back into those. All right, next question.
Andy Korkendorfer out of Vieira, Florida is up next. He says, if an encoder claims BT 2020 support, does that necessarily mean it supports HDR and wide color gamut?
Well, by definition, BT 2020 is a wide color gamut, and it is so I think that it should support those things. So it's the 2020 is the box that all of these color spaces sit inside of. So so it should support inside of the 2020 space. You should have space for HDR10, Dolby Vision, HLG, but those are specific mappings of that color space within that box. So that the other thing that the encoder has to do, in addition to seeing the 2020, and Bill, you have an open mic, the thing that has to see in that is being able to manage the metadata. So HLG doesn't need metadata, but HDR10, Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus all need for it to recognize the metadata that's being sent to it to make sure that the trims are correct. Next question. Next question. Can't hear you, Bill. There we go.
Can't hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, okay. Shrewsbury in the UK from Simon Ray says, is there a program for the Mac costing less than $50 US that allows boosting input levels? The maximum volume of the Aftershokz OpenComm headset mic is still on the quiet side. Loopback, etc. seems overkill for this.
Go ahead, Jason.
We here at Office Hours completely embrace the concept of overkill. To that end, I'd say nothing from Rogue Amoeba is a bad idea. I would go with Audio Hijack. It's a much simpler interface, and you've got much less of a chance of messing it up. Just keep in mind, you're going to need to set that preference and then recall it every time.
Yeah, I mean, I know it seems like it's overkill for Loopback and Audio Hijack, but you just get those. You're going to spend a lot of time fiddling with everything else. Next question.
Serge Blondin in Montreal, Canada is up next. He says, panel, going to buy a Mac Mini for my main Zoom machine. Any recommendations between 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes?
Go ahead, Todd.
I'm going to start with what I always tell my students: buy the most computer that you can afford, because you're always going to find a way to use up those extra gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah, Serge.
Yeah, I'm wondering, because you, Alex, told multiple times that you are using the 8 gigabytes version of the Mac Mini. Mm-hmm. But my setup right now is using 2 4K display with HDR. And the MacBook Pro I'm using right now, the 2018, is giving all it has. The fan are never stopping, and it's a mess.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think you would be counseled that 16 gigabytes would be a good place to be, and don't buy as much plug-in storage as for your secondary drive. Use it as plug-in storage. I think Alex would counsel that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Also, please don't buy a Mac Mini before the Apple event. Like, that's just, you're going to jinx us.
Hang on. Yeah, just hang on just for a second. It's we expect, we think probably there's better than 50-50 chance Apple will announce a new Mac Mini in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So we would probably hang out until then. Most of the Mac Minis that I have bought have been 8 gigs. And that's because I'm buying so many of them. I think in total between the company and myself, we've bought over 20. And so that little number difference between them becomes a big number. And we're using them as mission specific things that we know are only going to draw about 20% of the CPU. This is jumping onto Zoom, providing some basic, doing Zoom ISO, those types of things. And so it's made sense for us. Although if I'm going to get a general purpose Mac Mini, I would probably get a 16 gig. But if you're going to use something, that for the next couple of years, I'm only going to use it for this thing. Yeah, I might be tempted to do 8 if you're going to buy a lot of them. If you're going to buy one, just get a 16. Next question.
Next one comes from Dennis Carmichael, and he says, in this era of inconsistent supply chains, which Apple resellers have you had the best experiences with?
Go ahead, Sky.
I actually purchased several things through Costco. It's because I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. They're available. They've got a wide selection, and they'll take returns almost no question. But I also have the luxury of having an Apple store very close and by to me. It just means you have to wait in line to get to talk to somebody. But those are 2 options for you.
Mitchell.
Apple. They're going to have the supply. You got the Apple store to support it. It's just, when I buy something, I just want to go to the mothership to get it.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to say the same thing that I said last time this question was asked. Apple does Apple best, and their supply chains might be a little bit frustrating, but a reseller is not going to be better than the direct. I do not buy Apple from anyone else.
I have bought Apple from other places in the past.
Yeah, so have I, and I've regretted it.
Never do it again. I will never go to an outside dealer because it has to do with the Apple Care, and also nowadays I order it from the Apple Store and it shows up in 2 hours. It's not like it comes to my house in 2 hours. So I think that I have a hard time even thinking about going somewhere else. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Bill. You can go.
Well, I was just going to say, the only circumstance where I don't is if you're in a crisis of some kind and they have it physically in one of the Apple stores or physically in another retail. I've had circumstances where I've ordered a bespoke laptop, and it's fun to watch the supply chain. And I think Apple does supply chain management as well as anybody on the planet. I know that was Tim Cook's kind of area of expertise before he ascended to the top job. Right. But if I desperately, if my laptop gets stolen, I'm going to go to an Apple store, buy the best one they've got, and just pull out my thumb drives, and I'll be back to work in an hour and a half, which is amazing to be able to do that.
Yep. Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, Chrome OS Flex recently announced and might be able to breathe life into aging computers. Does the panel have any thoughts on the potential uses? And has a link there.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So it's interesting. I've got a couple HP laptops that I'm taking a look at to see if I can put Chrome Flex on. And of course, I have my MacBook 2012, my MacBook Pro, that I'm going to give it a try. The biggest thing is the touchscreen without the MacBook Pro, but it's definitely going to breathe life into one of these 2-in-1s, because then I can use it as a tablet and use it for just testing out different pages and things like that.
Next question.
Serge Blondin here on the panel from back in Montreal, Canada, says, Alex, how was your experience with live video in Keynote?
Yeah, I've been playing with it. I have not used it for a major presentation other than what we do here. I keep on playing with it and putting it into pieces and so on and so forth. And I'm very impressed with it. The fundamental issues that I've been kind of struggling with is, number one, is I have to kind of commit to the whole show being in Keynote so that I can set my audio delay, because my audio delay shifts. So if I'm live in my switcher and then I switch over to Keynote, my audio will be out of sync. And so that's been, so I have to decide I'm going to come do the whole event in Keynote to make that happen or not. So that's one of the challenges that I've had related to that. The other challenge is we talked a little bit about it in After Hours, but the fact that the black levels are different, so it's crushing the Keynote input is crushing the color a little bit. The way that I've sorted that out is that if in the Mac output, in Mac displays, you have a projector setting. In that projector setting, you can then remap your gamma and your black levels and white levels and to match a projector. And I've been able to match it almost perfectly between my switcher and Keynote. So I'm slowly kind of working through some of the idiosyncrasies of the process. But I'm going to end up using it a lot in these things. But it's been a little bit of a process. We'll probably do another Keynote third hour on a Saturday as we kind of figure that out, and I'll do the whole thing inside of Keynote. But the cool thing is you can have things over top of you with alpha channels, and then under, behind you, and then in front of you, and then you're over here. So as I play with it, I can see a future that's really exciting. I just haven't got that future to work 100% yet. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. And a lot of the big thing that I wish Keynote did was give us a grid view like what we see here with all my slides, because the problem that I have is that I don't really give presentations as much as I have a conversation. And so as I have that conversation with folks, what I want to be able to do is bring up the next thing, not have a linear thing that I'm trying to work my way through. I just want to talk to them and then, oh, you might want to see this slide, this slide, this slide. And what I'd love to do is have that where I can have them random access to them, but have them have a little tick mark that since you started presenting, you covered this slide. So I can know that, oh, I haven't gotten to this subject or I haven't gotten to that thing. That would be that. I think that's next generation for a presentation tool, because I think that the future is not doing a 20-minute presentation. The future is having a conversation with folks and being able to have graphics to support what you're talking about. Go ahead, David.
Prezi Video is good at that sort of
really?
non-linear presentation format.
Yeah, I just wish it had all the Keynote things.
Absolutely.
That's the problem with Prezi. Next question.
Next one comes from Josh Kaufman here in the back end of this from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Plugable 4K DisplayPort and HDMI dual monitor adapter is currently out of stock, popular for getting 4 times HDMI outputs into an ATEM for ISO recording into the Blackmagic Design Extreme ISO. What would be the good and best options for 4 times ISO recordings?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I'm going to put this into Makana right now. It's actually another Plugable that has dual HDMIs in it. You can give that a try. Other than that, look for anything with DisplayPort chip inside, because that's basically what's running is the DisplayPort chip. And if it works on the Plugable, whatever generic or other brand you get should be good to use from there.
I love when someone says best option. Best option is a Sonnet box for a Blackmagic Duo connected to your Mac Mini. That's what we're using for this stream when we're sending it out to YouTube. So every Mac Mini is outputting 4 SDI signals, and then you'd have to convert them back to HDMI if you're going to go into an Extreme. So that's probably the best option as far as getting 4 clean outputs out of it without an HDMI. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel, says, now that Office Hours is in the rocket business, why is NASA launching ISS resupply missions from Wallops Island, Virginia, and not Cape Canaveral?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I got the answer to this, so I apologize for answering my own question. I know that's bad manners.
He throws the ball to the 20-yard line, and there he is. There he is, catching the ball. Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, the rocket scientist that I asked said that the reason that they're launching from Wallops, which is in Virginia, is that the International Space Station is at 52 degrees inclination. And that means simply that it's a shorter distance between that part on the other side of the equator where we are than it is on the other side where, for example, Cape Canaveral would launch to. One that's in geosynchronous orbit is actually off the equator. That's a little bit harder to get to, easier for the Cape. So again, it's the angle of inclination, which I think is 52 degrees for the space station. It's just a shorter distance to the right.
Go ahead, Sky.
And I know you were just jesting in your comment about what is OH doing the business of. And I was going to just say, I think we're in the business of community, and we happen to be launching a rocket in March 19th, and John Predo's going to be the hero.
All I can say is, this is how it begins. Watch out, SpaceX. Elon Musk,
there you go.
coming for you. All right. All right.
In 4K.
Next question. Our launches.
Volunteer
Here's the deal: is
rocket
our
company.
rockets may not be better. Our rockets may not be as good as Elon's, but our coverage will be way better.
way
So they'll
better.
be like,
You see where we've set the
Way
bar
better.
there. Set the bar.
We've already got global coverage contributors.
yeah, exactly. All right.
Rodrigo Munez in Stockholm, Sweden is up next. He says, now that restrictions have been lifted, at least here in the Nordics, how would you pitch events to client types that weren't clients before the pandemic? And how do you prep for the demand for hybrid events?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've been putting a lot of thought into this, especially because on March 1st, our local area is going to be lifting the mask restrictions. There's still going to be federal restrictions. So if you go into government buildings or airports or anything like that, you're still going to have to deal with that. And then, of course, you're going to have to deal with what happens if they go back into a lockdown, or if people start getting ill again. So I've been working out some documents that basically say, this is what's going to happen if I can travel. This is what's going to happen if I can't travel. Because if I can't travel, I can't do the job remotely, or not remotely, but on site. And so we'll have to figure out a remote situation from there.
Go ahead, Bill.
I learned a lesson after 9/11, and it was that I thought my business was going to crash, and it actually did exactly the opposite. Things didn't work out as I expected. So I formed a little idiom in the back of my mind, is that disruption always equals opportunity. There's a lot of people who the client relationships have been disrupted through the course of the pandemic, which means that for those people who have been preparing diligently, brushing up your skills, adding capability, and forming connections with other people who fit into the areas that you're not, this may be a golden era of opportunity coming up. Act well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have this conversation with clients maybe almost every day. Maybe it's a couple times a week. And the way I kind of look at it is how big, where's your addressable market? You know, like, is it global, or do you have a handful of people? If you're a local business selling local goods, then you have a physical business. If you have an international business, or if you're selling things online, then your addressable market is somewhere between 3 and 4 billion. I mean, it's not everybody, but how many of them can actually come to your event? So if they can't come to your event, then the physical event is cutting, 99.99999% of your addressable market out of the conversation. And so then you'll say, well, then you want to do a hybrid. The problem is that when anybody's in the room, the online audience is in the back row. When there's nobody in the room, the online audience is in the front row. Do you want your largest audience to be in the back row or the front row? So hybrids are a disaster, and I have to admit that with clients, I probably lose work that way, but I'm pretty blunt about that, we're happy to do your hybrid event, but it'll cost more and be less effective. And it's actually damaging the brand, because people will come to the online one. That's the big audience, right? The ones that are going to come to the online version. The big audience is going to show up, and they are going to, it's not that they're going to complain. You'll say, well, no one complained. Well, that doesn't mean anything. What do they feel like the next time you do an event? Do they feel like this is a must, I have to go to this thing? Or, does life get in the way? And that's very different than complaining. And if they put you in the life, I have to go get groceries. It depends on what part of life gets in the way. I've got something more important to do. Then that starts to push that off, And so as a brand, you don't want to do that. So hybrid events create that experience for them, that it's not that they're going to complain. It's not that they're going to be upset. It's just that they're not going to come back over and over again to see what you have to say. And that's devastating if you look at it in the long term, when we see clients that are seeing audiences that are 20 or 30 times as big than they ever had physically. That's the future is not, and hybrid is, I usually tell people, well, it's cute. We can do that. I mean, it's what you do when you don't know what else to do, but it'll eventually be all digital first. Now, you may still have people get together. Like, we're doing stuff where we go, well, we can put a bunch of people in a venue, 300 people in a venue or a theater, and have them all watch together. So it doesn't mean that it means everybody's watching at home. It just means that you don't put people in the room with the speaker. That's all that you have to move towards. If they want to bring people in and they want to give them food and they want to do all those other things, just put an LED wall up there so that your online audience and your in-room audience have the same experience. Next question.
Wouter Bolin Kolwin in Bunschoten I believe Germany, but I may be messing all that up. I apologize. I like to have data-driven graphics for election night in vMix. Can I use Keynote and live output graphs into vMix? Or is the keying a challenge? Exported from Keynote with Alpha works great, but I need it live.
Go ahead, Serge.
I didn't use it with Keynote, with the vMix, sorry, but I use Keynote to output to my ATEM. I was keying with the Luma keys, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, you can definitely do it live out of Keynote. I can't show it right now, but I do that kind of key a lot when I want to have something just pop up next to me. I don't know how you do the data-driven part. There's graphics packages, like for instance, SPX, which we use for this show, could definitely take data in and build graphics for you in real time. That they're doing for the launch. That's what, so that's all. If you really want to take live data and put it in, if you're trying to just take data that you want to visualize in Keynote, then on that side, the key is that if you have blacks in your graphics, you just need to move the black level up about 3% in the graphic, and then you'll be able to key the background, really effectively. So that's all you need. 3% will be all you need to just do to do a nice key from the Luma key. Motion blur is a little problematic, and gradients can be a little problematic with the Luma key. So keep it on hard edges, and if you do that, you'll do well. Next question.
Mitchell Hill here in the panel says, which Linsoul IEM in-ear monitors are the best fitting and have the best sound?
Go ahead, Todd.
So all of them have kind of a mid cut. Mickey doesn't like them so much. I use mine just because I can hear well with them pretty much. There are only two. I mean, in the ZX, what is it, Alex? The K10s or whatever we keep talking about here. Even getting them from AliExpress, there are two different models that are kind of a different size. In terms of your ears, of course, I can't talk about the size, but the real secret to all in-ear monitors are the molds that you use to put in them, and these comply. They're branded comply, but they're foam ones. There are also generic ones that don't last as long that you can find on AliExpress, but that's where you get your fit. And in terms, the only reason I held these up was because this one here happens to be a little bit larger on this tip. It doesn't really impact my ears at all, but it feels like it's larger. And this black one that's just black feels smaller. So if you're looking for like footprints, ear prints, handprints, to like feel that they're larger or smaller, you can feel that. But these are basically the same assemblies here.
Yeah,
but
the ones
it's the foams that you want.
Yeah. I use the KZ ZS10 Pro is the one that I'm using for the show. Yeah. And I find them to be really comfortable. There is a higher end one that's like $130 that I also got, and it definitely is bigger. Like it's a bigger piece. And so I don't use it for live shows. I do find I don't think these are necessarily the best music speakers if I wanted to listen to something, but I do think for what we do here, they're very effective. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you probably see me fiddling with my Shure 215s, and it's because I've never worn IEMs before. I mean, in my 50-year broadcasting career, never did it. Now I'm learning. And the comfort is my number one concern because these are very uncomfortable. I feel like I got a knitting needle stuck through my head, and it's really irritating me.
Yeah, I think I definitely had that for the first, 10 years. Well, first 2 or 3 years at least out of the 10. But I've been wearing in-ears for so long that I don't even remember when I didn't. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, even $20 headphones come with a 3 pair usually of foam tips. And that just informs me that everybody's ears are going to be unique. And so one brand will fit better or less. And one of those sets of 3 tips is going to make you happier or sadder, just a variation in human beings.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing I will caution you on, no matter what pair of headphones you get, because I've been doing a lot of Amazon testing of all these in-ear systems, is don't get anything that has metal surrounding the outside, especially if it's touching your ear, because you will find that once it starts to get dry, you'll get little shocks, and then that'll travel through into your computer or whatever device and start causing problems.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
So it's not a good idea that when I pull these out, it sounds like a soda bottle being opened?
Yeah. And the thing is, what I will say is the Bumblebee sidekicks are more comfortable than any of the other ones that I use. So if you're looking for something that is going to be more comfortable and you're not as cost sensitive, I moved to these because they're easier to. The reality is, I hear more. I hear open mics a lot more clearly than with the sidekicks. So the sidekicks are, when I do it on a broadcast, I still use the sidekicks because you see nothing, with what they're doing. This cable's thicker. The problem I had with the sidekicks on a day-to-day basis using it in video conferencing was that they all got tangled up all the time. So I was constantly taking them off, putting them on, going back and forth, and they kept on getting tangled because the wire is so thin. And so I found that the thicker wire on this, and they're just easier to just throw on than the Bumblebees are. And so I still prefer the Bumblebees as a low impact, and I think that they're more comfortable. But I use these all the time because they're easier to get in and pull out and throw over something when I walk away. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota is up next. He says, since we're on the verge of rolling out Office Hours 2.0 and the room for experimentation is less, is it possible for us to have practice readers on Sundays for one of the hours? This allows Alex to dog food and gives the opportunity to practice or experiment.
Saturdays are good for that. So we'll definitely have Saturdays as a place for people to dog food the process, because we won't be officially broadcasting out from that. And so Sundays I practice it, and the reason it's important that I use Sundays as me reading it is because I'm testing the system. Like I'm going, oh, I like this or don't like this, or oh, Bill was right about that, or Courtney, I see what he's saying now. So anyway, so those are the kind of things. It's important for me to do it one day a week, just so that I have that there. But maybe I'll do it maybe on the weekday and then give Sundays away. So we'll think about that. Next question.
Javen Miller is up next, and he says, since the iPhone has a great camera on it, how do you recommend interfacing that with the PC so that it can be used as a video input on OBS?
Go ahead, Serge.
I will use Filmic Pro with the Lightning to HDMI connector. It's, for me, the best solution without lags and everything else. Keynote is another way to get these live video without the Lightning connector.
Yeah, Keynote just does it right out of it, right? It just sees the phone. Like you just go, I just want to send it to Keynote. Yeah.
You just need to authorize the phone first when you plug it to Lightning.
Yeah.
But then I was using like 3 iPhones at the same time with Keynote, and that was great.
It's really revolutionary. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Otherwise, you can use NDI. The NDI HX camera works really well, and of course, they just came out with the HX3 protocol, which I haven't tested yet. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. Going back to the phone, make sure that you that's not your primary phone, because if you get a phone call, that's going to mess everything up. Also, make sure you take everything off that could cause any type of problems connection-wise. Going back and checking on servers or anything like that.
Airplane mode works as well, I think, if you're connecting it via hardline. Next question.
Next one comes from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, and he says, any recommendations on a frozen firmware update on my Elgato key lights? The window says firmware update in preparation, and it's lasted for hours. Should I pull the plug?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yep, you totally should. And I think you'll find that they're pretty good about warranty switch outs, assuming they have the device that needs to be replaced in stock.
Yeah, Bill?
If not, good luck.
I'm curious, and the panelists, because these are very experienced computer users surrounding me, what is your pull the plug time? If something hasn't responded to you, is it 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 5 hours? How long do you give maximum before you say, this is wrong, I have to get out of this?
I'll answer that. I'd say generally 10 times as long as it's supposed to take.
Yeah,
so if you get a 3-minute install and it takes 30 minutes, you're gone.
That's right.
I'm trying to see, it's difficult sometimes, but if I see any way activities are on the device, or if I see my CPU working on that application to send data, or anything that give me the information that the activities are still going, I will wait. If I don't see any activities, I will kill it.
Next question.
The next question from Dirk Brewer is, what has been the most gracious or stylish recovery after a showstopper incident?
I'm trying to think about, I mean, I thought that in general, I don't remember which network did it, handled the fact that half the stadium lost power in New Orleans fairly well. Like during the, they just had to immediately switch over to, now we're just going to talk. And that's the hardest thing to do. Like I don't have anything that I needed to talk to, and now we're just going to talk. And one of the things I will say is that broadcasters can be extremely good at this. People who have a lot of broadcast experience can stretch for a long time. We had one where we had hired somebody to do the pre-show for a big conference. And the CEO is normally late, but was really late. And so the whole time we were sitting there just going, stretch, like this behind the camera, just like, we just need you to keep stretching. And he just kept on. He was actually an impersonator. He was at the time, I think it was a George Bush impersonator. And just kept on doing it and just kept on pulling stuff out. And we were like, I don't even know how this guy does this. It was really, really impressive to make that actually work. Go ahead, Bill.
I think the most recent big example that I saw, there was that concert in New York City in Central Park that got rained out, and Anderson Cooper was live on the air with his, there was a female co-host, and I should remember her name because she did an equally fabulous job with him, but they stretched for 2 hours live. And it was, I can just imagine the back channel chatter as they tried to arrange guests, and they tried to go, okay, we got to go live to a dressing room because one of the bands is in there and they're fiddling around, and we'll make that content. So get a camera and some lights in there real quick. They managed to pull it off for 2 hours, and it was entertaining. In fact, I think I enjoyed that more than the actual performances might have been.
One of the things that the most gracious or stylish recovery we never used was when we first got a motion capture system. I spent like $15,000 on a motion capture system, and we sold enough work in the first couple of weeks to pay it off. And so then I just had this mocap system around. And so we built for one of our clients these emergency slides. You always have, when you're doing live streaming, you typically have a starting soon, that's in case you're delayed. We'll be right back, which is the text slide. And thanks for watching. Those are the big three that you have. So for the we'll be right back, we built these animations, and they were just, one of them was this is when it was like stylish to have the Gumbies, the little Gumby people that are always moving around to show you how some corporate thing is going to happen. And so we had this little Gumby dude running across the screen and then back, then across the screen, and you hear this. Like, so when you cut to this is a problem, all you saw is this guy just running back and forth. And he'd run off the screen, like he'd run off the screen, and you hear this, and he'd run across the screen, and then we had one where he ran up to this wire that was like undone, these two wires, and he grabs onto both of them and sticks them together, and then you see like little Gumby skeleton going, and then he just falls over with a little smoke coming off of him, and then there was the last one was there was a wall and there was water coming out of it, like these little spouts of water, and he kept on putting his fingers into it like this, trying to stop them all, but there was too many, and so we were having all this fun with these things, and so we had this whole line of them, and our client said when he saw them, he was like, I just wish something would go wrong in one of these events, so that you guys can play these videos because they were so much fun, so figuring out a way to have that in your back pocket of knowing that the goal is always, Ross Cook, I probably talked to this, but I was talking to someone at Disney World. We were talking about the fact that they have to put, how do you get parents back together with their kids when the kids get lost? And they said, oh, you just, they have cameras everywhere. So they said, you find the kid, you can go back until they're with their parents, then you go forward with the parents, and then you find the parents and you bring them back together. He's like, it's really easy to get them together. And he said, I said, well, how often does it happen? He goes, 150, 160 times a day, that they have to find the kids. He goes, but every performer, every actor, all those characters that are wandering around, they're all trained, and their goal is to make sure that when a kid is that a child being lost will be the best experience that they get from Disney World. Like they have candy, they entertain them, they tell them stories, they do it. And so when something goes wrong, they figured out how to make it a good experience. And I think that's a really good lesson for us as performers, is like have something in your back pocket or have an emergency that's not just, oh, we'll be right back, but could potentially be better than, what you were going to do. And that takes a little bit, it takes a couple meetings. And so we do the best we can. We don't get it for every event, but we try to think of where we're going to go and that it will be cool if it does. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, Alex, you mentioned preferring Behringer consoles for low-end audio needs. Would you still prefer them over Allen and Heath, A&H, for example, even with their deficient support and sales network?
I used to own Allen and Heath, a couple of Allen and Heath boards, and I would prefer the Behringer all the time. So that's all I have to say. All right, next question.
Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California is up next. He says, what's the best way to transfer large video files from a PC to a Mac Mini or vice versa if both are connected via Synergy and on the same network?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think Alex would counsel don't drag the Mac hard drive icon over to the PC side.
I'm in the process of rebuilding my Mac because of that. So like it literally, literally dragging a drive halfway to the screen real estate from one Mac to another basically killed my Mac. Like that. Like I've taken Synergy off. Like I'm not using that anymore. But it literally put it into a race cycle that I couldn't shift recover. I couldn't do anything. Like it just kept on asking for the mouse so often that it was an unrecoverable. Like I've literally never seen a problem like that ever on a Mac. And so whatever Synergy is doing, it's too deep. Go ahead, Serge.
I'm using Resilio. It's by the BitTorrent company. Mm-hmm. It's a peer-to-peer transfer, and it's very fast on the LAN network. Mm-hmm. It's working PC, Mac, and everything else. The only issue I have with it is I'm not sure if it's still a project that they work on. It's a great software, working great, but I'm not looking for any feature update or updates at all.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'd have something in between. In most cases, your router can have a attached device to it, hard drive, and which is what I do, and so I'll send the file to the hard drive first, and then send it back over to the Mac that way. That's the easiest and probably the fastest way to do it.
Yeah, some kind of shared NAS is what we've used in the most. Synologies are really something that we've used across the network where all the computers have access to them, and then you keep your files there. Go ahead, Serge.
Yeah. An NAS, I think it's a great solution. Jeffrey, the solution you talked about, make sure that you're security-wise, because these features are security issue at most of the router have problem with that.
Next question.
Serge is right back up here from Montreal with best recommendations for a grip that can take an iPhone Max when using it with Filmic Pro.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I do this all the time. I use, this is from Hohem. This is their multi 3-axis gimbal stabilizer. And the cool thing about that is once I plug it in via USB, the power stays pretty much on. If you level the phone right, it will, even if it turns off, it'll only slightly move off frame, and you just have to remember to turn it back on. And then of course, if you're using a cable, you'll also have to keep in mind and figure out a way to kind of support that cable, so when it does turn off, it doesn't counter the weight on the phone when you're using it. But the best part is you have the joystick, so you can turn it back if you need to see the screen, and then turn it forward when it's time to use the camera. And of course, if you need to make small adjustments.
Good, Bill.
When I read this, I didn't think gimbal. I thought actual grip gear and something just to hold the phone. And my only suggestion is that you will find that anything below about $20 or $25 tends to be plastic. When you get above that, particularly into the $35 and up range, the grips tend to be metal, mostly machined aluminum, and those tend to be a much more stable surface for holding a phone, particularly if it's in some kind of case. So I have 7 or 8 of those around that I use for mounting iPhones, and they work with standard quarter 20s so that you can attach it to anything and put it anywhere.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I like the metal as well. And small rig seems to be really the Lego of professionals, because you can also attach multiple items to that, like a microphone or like I said, Bill said, the quarter 20 on the bottom, and it's solid. It's not plastic. And again, small rig is awesome at other different handles and gazinzas and connection things.
Yeah, I have a couple. The one that I've used the most for general purpose, I'm going to grip a phone, is this one, and I can't find it on Amazon anymore. It's Woohootu, and it's not available. But what it does is it rotates nicely. It's made out of metal. It's got a bunch of quarter 20s on the back. It's got quarter 20 and 3/8 on the bottom. I mean, it's the best made one. It's also got a cold shoe on the top. It is the best made grip I've ever seen, and I bought a bunch of them, fortunately, because I can't find them on Amazon anymore. The other one that I've now started to use, because Osmoke sent me one to test, is the Peak Design makes this. This is one, and what's cool about it is that I have my phone case, and I have a little wallet in the back, but I can take the wallet. It's just magnet. I just take the wallet off. And then I needed to have a wallet and be able to do this. And so then now what I can do is take this guy and it just snaps on. Now it's got a click, so it's not going to come off. It's actually fused in there. I have to kind of pull it to pop it off like that. And then I can put my wallet back on. Just like that. So anyway, it's a nice little setup. Peak Design makes it, and it's nice because I can it's a quick mount. So if I want to grab onto just any old camera, this one, and if I want to, for my main camera, I want to be able to do it. I'm using this now. It's really nice. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland says, I have 2 Dell monitors, identical models, but there's a color difference between them. How can I correct this?
Go, Jason.
Spider X Elite, I think, is your best bet. And before you do that, be sure that you completely reset any settings that you had on both monitors.
Yeah, Spider. Because what you're doing is you're fixing it in the computer on how it relates to it, but the Spider is hanging on the monitor. So the Spider is measuring the color on the monitor, and then finally adjusting basically a lookup table from the computer to the monitor. So yeah, Spider is the way to go. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York says, has anyone used the C-Vox noise reduction plugin from Universal Audio? I don't have a sound devices unit for noise assist, but my UAD Twin X can host live plugins, and he's got a link there.
I have not used it. The C-Vox noise reduction. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I don't use that, but I'm in the Universal Audio ecosystem because of my Apollo Solo that I use for that. And I will say that they are masters of adapting circuitry plugins for the digital world. They have an incredibly wide array of modeling software that goes back and does, from what the music people that I know refer to as very, very high quality digital looks at analog sounds. So I would trust them in terms of their ability to engineer solutions that sound good. So I would imagine it's pretty good. I've never used it, but I'm going to say everything I've used from them has been pretty high quality.
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, secondhand knowledge, very low latency latency, and it can work on other units. It's not specific to the universal equipment.
Yeah, and Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one thing. The reason they're they have such low latency is they use the hardware in their devices to speed everything up. So it's not just software; it's a hardware-software combination. The hardware makes them super low latency.
Yep. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw of Atlanta, Georgia says, Alex, you mentioned you preferred the Behringer X32 rack over the console. Are there any cons to the rack, and can you use the Dante plug-in board in the rack?
Yeah, there's lots of cons. I prefer it, but there's a lot of things that you don't get with it. So number one is you can put the Dante card in. All of these X32s have a card slot in them, and all of mine have Dante slots. So I that's the first thing I do is I take the USB card that comes with it out and put the Dante in. And so that it's not complete until it has that, as far as I'm concerned. As far as the advantages and disadvantages, there is a big advantage of really having an integrated, all the faders and controls and an interface and everything else on an X32 is all there, and it's a real mixer, and it has a lot of real controls that you can have in real time. So we definitely have put X32s into, and large ones, as well as the producer, as well as the there's lots of different versions of that have a different number of sliders, that have a different number of inputs and outputs on the back. And so while the general engine is the same between all of them, I think that there is there are some definite advantages. What I like about the rack is that I can get an X-Touch controller that is just anywhere I want to put it, and it's only an Ethernet connection away, from that box. And so it's just a way simpler way for me to, from a signal flow process, it's easier to manage. And also because the rack is racked and it's not moving, all of my I/O, if I'm using any kind of analog I/O, it's all in the rack. And it's not something I'm trying to put on a desk, and having to run a bunch of analog cables out to it if I had to. So I like keeping it compact. And so a vast majority of them are racks, but we've definitely got ones that are consoles. And then as soon as we get to something that's heavier than what we think the X32 can do, we usually go up to the QL1, then the QL5, then the CL5, then the CalRec. so those are that's kind of the how we step up our mixers as we get them. So next question. Oh, I think, no, actually, we're going to, the reason I moved that one there is so that we could change subjects. So now we're changing subjects here and jumping into our second hour. And I'm so excited to have Blair on. Blair, Blair Anderson is joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland. Blair, can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely.
And you're coming in a little overmodulated, Blair. I think that maybe we change something on the mic there. Go ahead and talk a little bit more.
All right. Well, I'm coming from Maryland. I'm going to be showing you a couple of my studios. Is that good?
It's pretty good. Yeah, I feel like it might be turned up a little high. We might try to.
So bring it down.
Yeah, just a little bit.
All right. So let me just add some verbiage.
Yeah.
So this is home studio. This is where we're going to start out, and then I'm going to show you two of my other studios. I'm going to show you a little bit about my process and my work, and hopefully then you'll have some questions for me.
That's good. Yeah. So, well, tell us how you've been doing metalsmithing for a long time.
A long, long time. So yeah, it's been over 35 years. So I started way back. I won't tell you how long ago. I mean, what my age is. Okay, I'm 57.
How did you get into it? How did you decide that metalsmithing was your thing?
Getting a degree in fine art. I was getting a degree thinking I was going to be a painter, an illustrator, commercial artist, whatever, and took one of those little pesky electives that you need to finish your degree, and it happened to be silver fabrication, and I was hooked. That was it.
What do you love about metalsmithing?
Flame with fire, torch. We're going with the torch.
The torch is the key to the operation.
It's absolutely the tactile nature of it too. It's right. The three-dimensionality rather than doing just illustration work. It's there's sculpture involved.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I did very, very simple ones in high school, and I just loved the fact that you just come up with something so pretty. Like, when you're done, it's a pretty thing to look at. It's just really fantastic. So you have a little bit to show us.
Yes, I do. I have a little bit of a presentation. I'm going to show you both of my studios, and so we're going to walk through that, and you're going to see me back in the day as well. So we're going to start with that.
Outstanding.
All right. Here we go.
And and for folks, as Blair gets started, as she's showing us around, if you've got questions for her, go ahead and throw those into into Makana. Okay, go ahead, Blair.
Okay, so over the years, I have developed a style, and it's interesting that you guys were talking about this last week about storytelling. And so my style developed with telling stories in the work. So the work has been consistent throughout my 35 years. And so I'm going to first start by showing you some of that work. So I love using rich texture, unusual stones, found objects, and multiple techniques to create an emotion in a piece.
It's beautiful.
So, me back in the day. And me paying the dues.
And what do you mean by paying the dues?
When we, let me go full screen again. Paying the dues is like developing yourself. You get good at what you do, and you do some of the low-end craft shows, and then you work to do the juried shows. So the juried shows are highly competitive, and then you get into the galleries, and so it's just the sort of the pathway. And paying the dues is getting out there in a tent and actually selling your work. So my husband lovingly calls it the $20 earring syndrome, where you have to do cranking out the.
It's just lots and lots, just mass production of many. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yep.
Very good.
So a lot of water under the bridge since then. Multiple shows, galleries, studio locations. Now I've landed where I'm going to show you, and it's a really special place called Glen Echo Park. So I'm going to give you a little tour, just a quick tour. This is in a national park, so I've got two public studios, in the national park. They're both called SilverWorks. SilverWorks 1 and SilverWorks 2. So SilverWorks 1 is in the stone tower. SilverWorks 2 is on a main floor, but this is a national park and it's a rich community of artists. We also boast the last known Denzel carousel, which is over 100 years old. So who doesn't love a good carousel ride, right? So it's a beautiful building. So I'm going to just give you a tour. Let's go into Studio 1. So this is my beginner studio. Now the beginner studio is a tiny, tiny space, but I do have a little gallery in there. But what it's meant for mostly is not just my workshop, but it's also a teaching space. Now we got some antiques in there to keep sort of up with the fact that it is a really old national park. 8 stations for 8 students. That's my maximum. And then we have 4 torch stations for those students as well, so they don't have to really line up. Number of traditional tools. Each station has a set of tools for the students, plus a lot of bells and whistles. But it is a true beginner playground. In fact, Brian calls it the gateway, so I get people hooked on the craft. I also label everything, just for educational purposes. So that's Studio 1. Mm-hmm. Now, I started Open Studio 1 12 years ago and added the more advanced studio 5 years later. So the bubble's going to take us into Studio 2. Now this is on the main floor of the same building, but this studio has a little more of a steampunk vibe. I love my inspirational spaces to be beautiful. The difference with this one is it's got the traditional jeweler's benches, so for more of the advanced students. Each bench has a set of tools and a flexible shaft, which is the drills that you see hanging. I'm also equipped with Lost Rex casting equipment, so that's all my casting equipment there. I have a hydraulic press, so lots of forming tools. It's a true playground for metalsmiths, but it's also my Cadillac studio. And there's my mill, my rolling mill. We call her Millie, like she named her. And again, I label everything for the educational purposes, for people to be able to be reminded what things are. Got a sandblaster back in the corner. And last but not least, there's a little gallery that you enter that shows my work for enticing the public that visit the park.
That's awesome. And you're running classes year round, right? I mean, is it kind of a constant thing?
Well, the great thing is I'm running classes now again, because pandemic, my spaces, because they were so small, I was restricted and I could only have me in the space. So live classes have begun again. I started in September, but pandemic forced me to do what we're seeing here, is get a little bit of the filming of my work done. Right. And so I learned Resolve and learned editing and spent the time watching all you guys. I'm a long time listener and didn't know what I'd do with it, and here I am. So we're utilizing everything that the boyfriends, as I've been calling you all, have been allowing to inform me. It's been an education the whole time, so it's been really, really great.
Yeah, and how much and are you still doing online classes, or is it mostly back to physical classes?
Well, I never even got to the online classes. I'm still working that hybrid out, but the great thing is it's opened the door for doing that and for even supplementing the people who've already taken classes from me. So that's been a great thing, because they get refreshers that are just quick video refreshers, and that's been really sort of a helpful way to round out what they experience.
I mean, the point I'm trying to get to is when can I take classes from my house from you? That's what we're trying to get to here. Of course, it's great. It's
yeah, absolutely soon. So
yeah, it's so much fun. I mean, metalsmithing is just one of my. I don't do very much of it because I'm not very good at it, but it's one of my favorite things. So it's
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
With a good
So
teacher.
I used to do all those shows, and you know, life shifts gears on you a little bit. And at one point, I had over 30 galleries across North America representing my work. So I don't do that anymore.
And why don't you?
Instead, been there, done that.
Right.
Bought the T-shirt kind of thing. The mass production, you get kind of burned out. Going back to the true love of actually doing the original work, which is
Right.
more of the one-of-a-kind pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So these are what my shows look like now. I do a single one-person show. I do one collection a year, and so I have patrons that come back and buy my work. So it's kind of a nice place to be in the career part, because I'm not having to go and do some of those tent shows or even the Smithsonian or some of those other shows that I used to do. But the collection, like what you are seeing here, I typically do a theme for a collection. So for instance, one year I did a theme interviewing cancer survivors. And so the cancer survivors all had their stories. So I basically built jewelry that told their stories. Another one was a thing, I have synesthesia, where I will hear a bar of music and it'll trigger a design, an actual design.
You can see in metal.
I can see exactly. That's exactly what happens. So, you know, when Todd's playing the violin, I mean, I was listening to him once, and boy, you know, suddenly I've got a design in my head, and it's a blessing and a curse.
Do you feel like you have to make it?
Sometimes, and sometimes this is just a sketch. Like in that particular show, I did the sketches right when the bar hit, and then I executed the design. So some of them were fragments, and some of them were actual complete like designs that I could see. So anyways, that little girl cute. She was listening to the bar. So these are the shows that typically when my patrons come back, they collect my work, and then I move on and do the teaching. So it's pretty cool.
And
so go ahead.
No, keep going.
So can I tell you one of my stories?
Yeah,
one of my
please do.
Pendants?
Please do. Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
So this is how I approach the work, and this is one of my favorites. It was the collection was called Captured in Time, and Captured in Time was basically taking relics and making work around the relic. When I was doing that show, that's the year that Ray Bradbury passed away, and he's one of my favorite authors. And Fahrenheit 451, if you don't know the book, I've got it here because I love it. It's basically a sci-fi novel about a future fireman. And the firemen in the future, they don't save us from burning buildings. They actually burn books. So it's kind of timely right now, right? So the burning building here in the pendant that you see. So see the little burning building, and there's little flames coming out of the window. What you don't see in this pendant is that it opens up into a jump drive. And the jump drive is what's cool. It holds 10,000 readable books.
Oh, that's cool. That's so
and
cool.
There's the interface. So you can bring up the Odyssey or Mark Twain or any one of those other
awesome.
things. So,
that's so great.
Yep. Now another one, I'm just going to share another one and then we'll move on to the demonstration. This is called Haitian Shorts, and this basically depicts the machine that builds our luxury items. So we were on a beautiful beach in the Bahamas and ran across a Haitian refugee wreck. And so I was picking through the wreck. It's kind of it was a shame to see all the stuff strewn all over this beautiful beach. But I found a pair of denim shorts, and they happened to be my size. So I was like, okay, interesting, I'll take them home. But then it got me thinking, well, what happens when you see something travel from one place to another? And in the case of our stones, what stones we picked was sterling silver, amethyst. The diamond is the thing in this piece that I did not know its origin. So everything else, I knew the origin, including the side panel, which is the short part. The denim is actually encased in resin. And this is all a moving part. And what that addresses is the machine that brings us those luxury items, and whether or not they're harming someone somewhere. Like the diamond could have been a blood diamond. I don't know. So that's Haitian shorts.
That's great.
Okay. So can I show you do a little demonstration?
Is there going to be fire involved?
There's going to be fire involved.
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
going to be fire. I'm going to show you 3 techniques, and then you can ask me all the questions you want.
Yeah, it sounds great.
So the first one is a texture that I make that's really, really cool, and it's the rolling mill. So I'm going to switch to, all right. This is a rolling mill. So the rolling mill is simply a couple of, they're steel, and you can actually put something through this, and it will create a texture. So what I've got here is some silver. Then I'm going to just put some sandpaper around it. And it's going to go into my mill. So you see how that sucks that in? And then...
So the sandpaper is what's adding the texture?
Yes. So it comes out of the mill. And you can see the texture I got just with the sandpaper. So that's the mill. Now there's a piece that I want to show you that's that I'm working on right now. So this piece, if you look here, that is the sandpaper. And this piece is called Water Baby. It's an aquamarine that's going in Water Baby. And the pearl depicts an irritant that actually makes something beautiful.
That's great.
Now, the other textures that you can come up with, I think are fascinating, and somebody don't be grossed out by this, but so cicada wings make a fantastic texture. In fact, there's an example here. Corn husk, different kinds of paper, they all make really, really fun textures. Now,
so you press the cicada wing into the metal?
Yeah. So that's what that little example of the copper. Yeah, I know it's highly addictive. So yeah, that's really, really fun.
I don't even know what I need it for, but I need to have that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I didn't have one until the studio at Glen Echo Park, so I went all those years without a couple of these really, really fine tools. So the next thing that I want to show you is, oh, and actually there's another one that actually shows the sandpaper. So that's Ocean's Old and New.
That's beautiful.
And that shows the sandpaper texture. Okay, fusion. So fusion is this awesome technique that actually I'm going to bring down. This is a technique I use to create Abbott and Costello. So these earrings, it's called Abbott and Costello. The background is a fusion texture, and that's what we're going to use for the fire. But then the whimsical faces of the comedy team that we know of Abbott and Costello. So we're going to move to our fusion. All right. So this is where it gets fun. All right, so here's my bench. We got the torch going on here. We're going to light up the torch. Now I'm going to show you close up. So it's acetylene. This is a Smith's torch. So we love our fire, don't we? Yes, we do. And it's just it's a really handy tool because you can take the tips, change the tips really easily. So we're going to hike up that flame, and I'm going to show you what fusion looks like. So we're moving to the bench. So we're going to heat up this metal. And it's going to take me a few minutes, but you'll start to see the metal change color. And unlike soldering, which I do, most of the pieces in my work are soldered. this is going to be just melting metal. So now you're going to see it go molten. So what happens to the metal is you have fine silver separating. So this is sterling silver, but the fine silver separates from the copper and then fuses. So we end up creating a nice molten.
So it's not molten, but not all of it's molten.
Right. If I melted it completely, I would burn a hole through it.
Right.
So we're going to take that and so I'm throwing it in a chemical substance called pickle. So pickle is sulfuric acid.
And why do you put it in the sulfuric acid?
It keeps it clean, so when we do go to solder, we'll actually end up with a clean white piece of metal. And that allows us to solder. If this is oxidized at all, it won't solder. The solder would repel from it. Mm-hmm. So that's my fusion.
That's awesome.
Now, one last thing I want to show you is a technique. It's a very traditional smithing technique. It's called piercing. Why my industry calls this piercing, I have no idea. It's simply sawing. It's using a jeweler's saw. And so I've got the saw all set up, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of sawing. We're going to start by getting right close up. So this is what I call a cymbal ring. So it's just a bunch of symbols that have been sawed out of the metal. But I'm going to show it to you with, this is 14 karat gold. And so I'm creating that ring, the same thing. The difference with sawing, if you're doing wood versus what I'm doing, is if you're sawing wood, you're moving forward. And if you're sawing using a jeweler's saw, you stay in place. And it's also the way you grip. So the way you grip the handle is not gripping it like this, it's playing the violin. So there you go, Todd. You can totally do this. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little bit of sawing so you can see what it looks like. I've already sawed out the majority of this particular design, but it is just a simple, smooth strokes. And I won't bore you by going all the way around, but that's basically it, is you take the saw and you cut all that out.
And do you just draw the shapes that you want on there and then cut them out? I mean, you're using just like a Sharpie, or
yeah, that was a Sharpie. Yeah, that was actually a Sharpie. So in fact, you can see the design it's in black there. But sometimes you would actually applique it by using just your design and then glue it. As humble as that sounds, you just glue it to the panel.
So that might be something that you design on a computer, you print it out, and then glue it
Mm-hmm.
to the metal.
You could absolutely do that. The other thing is just preparing something. So for instance, if I were to go here, and if I wanted to do a design, I can actually start from the sketch, and then this piece that would have been cut out, I would take that and copy that, and then there's my cutouts.
Right. That's great.
Mm-hmm. So that's my demonstration, just the humble usage of tools. There's back to Abbott and Costello. That was the part that used fusion.
And that's mixed it. So you fused the back pieces, and then you soldered the finer elements back onto it.
Exactly, and that's the mistake that some people think you can just fuse something like that. But there are two parts to that. The wires that are pristine, those were soldered on the base afterwards. Because if you tried to fuse all that, obviously you'd be melting all the really pristine stuff. So
that's great.
So we are.
Well, we've got some questions stacking up, so let's go ahead and jump into them. Bill, let's go to their first question.
Our first one comes from Todd Reynolds in North Adams, Massachusetts, who's in the panel. He says, in perusing your website, I noticed your Exnihalo residency. Is this digital or physical, and can you tell us more?
It's both, but really, we're building a place in the Bahamas for a residency program. However, the SilverWorks residency has been ongoing since, let's see, how long ago was that? 2011? Yeah, that's when we started. So I've had at least a dozen people come through that. Our residency is basically, we take juniors, mid-career, and seniors, and we basically, once we've judged whether they need the time or can benefit really well from the time, then we give them free studio time, we give them free classes. In the case of the junior artists, we give them a portfolio, so we help photograph their portfolio for college, and then so we get them launched. So our latest one, we have one young man who's now he's now studying in Milan. He came to me when he was 15, and he's a genius. He was going to go on to be absolutely famous. But yeah, so the residency program is just us giving people a sandbox to play in.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Sky Gleason here in the panel, and he says, you are very comfortable with your video tools. How long did it take you, and why do you care about video production?
It's interesting. It was a necessity in the beginning of the pandemic to try to figure out a way to show the craft. The problem was it's so tool specific. So I was trying to design components to share with my audience. And my husband, even though Brian works in video, he still had the job. So he was employed and I was shut down. So it became apparent that I had to learn the tools. So thanks to office hours, I learned that Resolve was going to be my friend. So DaVinci Resolve, I learned how to do that, how to edit it. So I've gone through that painful, just learning something new, learning a new skill at this point in my life. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Sky?
I just want to say how grateful I am to know you, and that you participated in my world, and that now we get to participate in yours. And your husband has been a great support to me personally, and that I just love that you're sharing art in a creative process, and you're letting the tools of video, get that outside of your studios. And I've been to the studios; they're amazing.
Yeah, and go ahead, Blair.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is that I think that I do think that there's an opportunity that is going to find its way. As you get because you've figured these tools out, there's a huge audience, I think, for you that's beyond just the. I mean, I think that I would love to come and do it in person, but I'll never be able to do that in any long period of time. So it'd be fun. I'm really looking forward to when you get more of the video stuff figured. Like actual live classes.
Give yourself 3 days, Alex. You'll never step away.
Let's jump to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, would you ever think of incorporating CNC machining or 3D printing with metal into your work?
Great question, Douglas. Okay, so 3D printing.
That's cool.
If I were to go close up, let's do this. Let's go to, I'll show you an example.
And what are you modeling in?
Well, I have to hand this over to my husband, who decided to play in SketchUp. So this was done in SketchUp, and we 3D printed it, and then I cast it.
So what's the process of going from a 3D print to a cast?
So 3D print, so you go from your 3D model to the actual print, and we've got a Formlabs printer that we use. So this would have been the printed product. Then this would be sprued up and put in a ceramic mold and then burned out, and then molten metal using the Lost Wax cast process would have made the metal. So there's several steps to it, But this is what the model looks like after it comes out of the printer. And this is obviously a bracelet. The ring, I couldn't drag up the ring this morning. I couldn't find it. But this because my husband doesn't design jewelry normally, but because he did, this has become my new wedding ring. So
That's
isn't that
great.
pretty?
That's
Pretty cool.
fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And the process of the building the ceramic mold, how does that work?
I don't have any of the props for that, but simply it's you take your model, this, and you would connect it with a sprue to a base, and then it goes into a cylinder, and then that cylinder is filled with a plaster substance. Then that's put into a kiln and burned out, and so it leaves that hollow shape. So it burns this away. So that goes away.
And is that a certain
So it
kind of
ends up being a
substance
mold.
that burns well, or is it anything that, I mean, because it seems like, you know, that the Form Labs is printing something that's burnable, right?
Yeah, they've upped their game on their products. So there is a burnable product that's really meant for that. But I've experimented over the years, not just with 3D printing, but plastic toys. The bugs, the cicadas, they don't burn out. The cicada that I have behind me that I cast was cast from a mold, but certain bugs do burn out. So you can actually sprue an insect and burn that out and have that object come out.
Right.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from John Pretto here in the panel. He says, are you using Fordham flex shaft tools?
Yes, I am.
What
Short
are
answer.
Fordham flex? Can you tell us what those are?
So Fordham is flexible shaft. I have it hanging here. It's basically like a dental drill. And the traditional flexi shaft, and he's nodding his head. Yes, you know what this is. They're different kinds. There's a Prodigy that's a beginner version, but it's basically an overhead drill, and it's foot pedal.
Is this kind of the industrial version of a Dremel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
It's what I'm
That's
using on the
exactly right.
rocket to build the rocket.
Got it.
Oh,
So it's
fantastic.
it's like the big version of the Dremel. A lot of us grew up with Dremel tools, but this is like the okay, now you're serious, you're going to do it every day kind of version.
Well, and the Studio 2 tour, what you saw with the jeweler's benches was each one of those benches had a Fordham. So each one, they all have their own. So yeah,
that's great.
The big girl tools.
Next question.
Todd Reynolds, North Adams, Massachusetts. I'm inspired by how your design, video, keynote, photography, and studio design is so integrated and consistent. Not surprising, but is it possible to articulate some of your foundational design concepts which undergird all of your creative processes?
Oh, where do I begin? That's a big question. I think aesthetic is my first. The surroundings and my aesthetic is the first thing, and then and that affects everything. So it's a trickle down effect. Even when I'm doing the actual work, I'm often inspired by just a gemstone, a really unusual stone, and that'll say, "This is where I want you to go," and so I just follow along. The choices we made for the studio designs were mostly to enable other people to feel creative. So I've been in a lot of different studios, and they can be grimy and uninspiring, and that also hinders your work. If things aren't at your reach and easy to get to, it's hard to actually be creative because then you've got roadblocks in the way of your creativity. So does that kind of land?
Yeah, absolutely.
Were
you going to say, Todd?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, when you look at a gemstone, this is coming from a musician, so it's like I'm always compelled by how people see and what that really means to them. So when you look at a gemstone, that gemstone tells you where to go, what to do. Is it shape first? Is it color first? It's like when I look at the consistency behind all your visual aesthetic, even when you said I start with the aesthetic, I'm kind of asking what that is. What is there a way to say? I was going to say what your aesthetic is. When you look at a gemstone, this is coming from a musician.
I think
it's like
Todd,
I'm
you might be
always
feeding us.
compelled
We're
by
trying to
how
figure out what
people
we're.
see and what that
I think
really
your question
means to
fed
them.
back into us.
So when you look at a gemstone, that gemstone tells you where to go, what to do.
I
apologize.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry for that little
Sorry,
loop
I
there.
had
We
a
got into a
loop.
little
There's
loop.
a serious loop there. I'm like,
Yeah, I was
oh
trying to
my
figure out.
gosh, I'm hearing myself.
I was trying to figure out what I was listening to. But yeah, it's fascinating. Let's go to the next question.
TJ Asher's up next from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he says, can we get Blair's husband, Brian, to maybe give us a second hour on the incredible infrastructure he designed and assembled to give Blair this incredible ability to show so many locations and detail?
Well, don't you think I can do that?
Let's have you show it. Let's have you show it to us. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Show us the
you
process.
You want to see the tech, right?
Yeah. We want to see the tech.
Yeah, you want to see the tech. Okay, he is going to drive the driver, but I'm going to step aside and actually show. Are we going to get to where the whole cockpit is? So we'll start there. All right. What do you want, hon? All right, there's my cockpit. So this is where, the even my filming is happening here. So this is the cockpit. Now I'll give you a tour of the rest. So I have the DMX controlled lights for me, and then the ring lights for my 2 benches. The 4 ring lights were inspired by Guy Cochran. They work great with the low ceiling, and they change color, which is kind of fun. There are 2 overhead mics to capture sound while I'm recording. And so I can move around. I'm using Ceramonic Blink 500 Pro with a lav and Tozo NC9 Bluetooth earbuds. And I have to confess, I am reading this, so I couldn't tell you the chain. All right, now here I have to get out of the way. I have 3 Bird Dog PTZs. Here's where my sci-fi love comes in. I've named them all. You see I have Hal, Hugh, and Gort. My Black Magic 6K named Ripley. Okay. And get my head out of the way. So we have the TARDIS. This is to control all this stuff. It's the ATEM Mini Pro. TARDIS. And the Borg. Oh, actually Spock is the Bird Dog PTZ controller. So we skipped to Spock and went to the Borg. There's the Borg. And above that, the Borg, which is the Shogun that brings the Bird Dogs in for ProRes recording and then touchscreen switching. There's my M1 Mac Mini. It's also my editing computer. So everything is mounted on a VESA arm. So when I hammer, things don't shake. In the beginning, I was hammering and filming and realizing that every time I hammered something, the whole bench would shake, and that didn't work. So he solved that for me. Everything is controlled by Companion on an iPad instead of a Stream Deck. The iPad also controls Ripley and the ring lights using iPad apps. And finally, there's Ripley behind my Prompter People 24-inch teleprompter and confidence monitor.
That is an incredible setup.
That's awesome.
Well, that's my husband. Okay, so that's Brian.
Yeah.
And he had to teach me how to use it. So, but now I can switch and
That's awesome. It's really inspirational for someone who wants to teach and really turning that studio, like really turning it all the way up to being able to show analog skills super effectively, because every time you go to something and you're showing us a close-up, it's just fantastic.
Well,
and
it's all really your
necessary. Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad it's working out. It's really, I can't wait to see. I'll benefit from this when we start taking the classes from you online. So can't wait. Next question.
Comes from our friend Greg Kurta in Central Norway, and he says, can clients commission works from you, or do you freely create and then make those available?
Hey, Greg, that's a great question. I used to be the slave to actually doing the commission work. I've been there, done that, and I will only do commission work if people understand the storytelling aspect. So if they understand, like, I'm not going to do a custom, I had a customer way back when their family name was Macaw. So guess what I got to do? As a parrot with a ruby eye. Well, I don't do that anymore. That's now I will do custom work, but only if the person gives me the leniency to do it the way I would do it.
Right. Absolutely. Next question.
Idris Haggy in Fairfax, Virginia is up next, and the question is, what gear are you using for audio and camera to show different shots, and what kind of camera are you using for this presentation? I think we just covered that.
Yeah, we just got through it, so let's go to the next question.
Next one comes up from Roscoe Jones in Bray, California, and he says, what's the largest piece you've created?
Oh, a bust of Haydn. So actually, it was a sculpture of the composer, and I did it for it was for a symphony in Alberta, Canada. So that was the largest.
Did a whole bust?
I did a whole bust
How
out of
nice.
sterling silver. Yeah. But yeah, that comes to mind as the largest thing. It's an interesting question. A lot of my work does run large because of the storytelling aspect. I have pieces that are, very elaborate. But something that wasn't wearable would have been the bust.
Yeah, it'd be hard to wear. If you're wearing a bust, it's probably something bad happened.
Actually, wait a minute. No, I take that back. Hold on. So I challenged myself one year to make a 10-foot chain.
Now, what was the challenge for doing just so much of it?
It was the experiment of what is wearable, just to think of what can be worn. And we actually had this on a bride where it went all the way down her train. But I've worn this in a couple different events, and it's 10 feet long. But yeah, that's probably for jewelry, that's the largest piece. Good question, guys.
My bucket. This is a little bit geeky, but my on my bucket list is building chainmail, just once. Just to do it once. No, I don't know if I'd build a whole one because it's a lot. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Bray, California says, would you please explain your favorite tools for lost wax casting?
Simple ones. A wax file, and there are some really fancy tools out there, and I tend to be a tool minimalist. Dental tools and an alcohol lamp is what I use and what I teach with. The two techniques that I use are reduction and addition, and that's it. It's very simple.
And so what is a wax file?
A wax file it's a file that I don't have one here. Actually, it's very similar to the file here I have on the wall. It's simply a file that's got wider teeth, so the teeth will scrape at the wax. This is a metal file, so it would gum up the file if you used a file like this. So it's just the teeth are spaced further apart, and it just shaves off the wax so that you can carve it into a shape. And it's again a very simple tool.
Yeah. Go ahead, Todd.
Please tell me I have no YouTube playing.
You do not. You do not have.
Thank you.
playing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, is that what that
Blair,
was? Okay.
Yeah, I explained it in our panel view. I'm so sorry for that. Could you just speak to the lost wax method period? Like describe that, because I've actually done that as a musical project once in my own way. So it would be fascinating to hear a description from you about what the lost wax method is.
Sure. Let me grab a object here. So for instance, this, and it looks quite different. The cast products do. I have this taped on here to hold it. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to bring this up so you can actually see it a little bit better. All right, so this is an example of a cicada that what I did is I took the actual bug and put it in a silicone mold and then injected that mold with wax that created the model. And once you create the model, it's exactly what I explained before with the bracelet. You create that model and it goes into that cylinder and you pour in the ceramic substance, and then that gets kiln fired into a hard mold. And then you basically take molten metal, and I use a furnace that you take it and pour it. So once you've got your mold, you put that on your vacuum and you pour that hot metal and it sucks it into that mold. And then you crack that open, you actually quench it in water and it explodes. and out comes your model, hopefully intact if you did it right. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but I have a pretty good track record because I do this with my students, and it's really horrible the day that you lose your students' work. So I've only had that happen once. But yeah, so that's pretty much the whole system of how that works.
Do you find having students or teaching improves your work, the actual work that you do?
Absolutely. I was kind of, before taking over or starting SilverWorks 12 years ago, my work had taken on sort of you have a bag of tricks that you use over and over again. And because I had the demand, once I started doing beginning classes, people started coming to me going, well, what about this technique and this technique and this? And I was like, well, I've done all of them, but I've never practiced them. And so I became really practiced at techniques that I normally, like one, chasing and repousse is one that it's very highly textured. Yeah, chasing and repousse. It's French for you push and pull, and you end up with much more sculptural texture. So you use a pitch bowl, and you take chasing tools like this, and you hammer the metal into the pitch bowl, and it creates recesses, and then you flip it and you do more. I hated that technique because it uses pitch, it's messy. And then so I went back to it, and now I love that technique. So you're absolutely right. It makes you better. It makes you broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Next question.
Sky Gleason, Seattle, here on the panel. What's your website? How can people buy your work, and how can people learn about from you about your jewelry craft?
Just a direct email. Right now, I'm not selling anything online. I just don't. I don't do that. Typically, when people see the work that's in the gallery, in the different show collections, they'll contact me and say, this one's still left. It hasn't sold. I would like to have that. And then, anything else content-wise. I mean, I have people that ask me, questions about just even the craft. So I get emails like that.
Next question.
What email is that? What is it? The email?
I don't know if we can put it on. We want to put it on YouTube. We'll be careful about that. Yeah.
Put it somewhere else.
Yeah. Next question.
Thank you.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia is up next. Can you talk about the use of Keynote?
Hey, Tony. Yeah, the Keynote is what drove this particular presentation, and the great thing that we discovered was the fact you could put, a live feed into that and the video as well. So the combination of the two, it made it a really good way to present, and you can be creative with it too. And I'm still a neophyte at it, so Brian tends to drive that car a little bit more than I do. But I've got the graphic design skill, so we make a good team.
It's the best implementation of Keynote I've seen so far. Like, you guys really, it's just so cool.
Thank you.
It just it all kind of works together. And while I'm playing with that live feed, I haven't done it in a lot of presentations or any presentations that I've done for any significant amount of people. And so it's fascinating to watch it, and it's just really inspiring. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. How do you find time to both create your own work and teach and learn to do video?
Cindy, that's the ultimate question. Absolutely. It's interesting. When I prepare a collection for a show, I've typically take about 6 weeks to do an entire show, which is pretty hardcore. The teaching is compartmentalized, so I do. Before the pandemic, I did about 75 classes in a semester, and so it's pretty intense. A pandemic has slowed me down a bit. And then the video part, that's the part that getting that sandwiched in is tricky, because it's like you're shifting your brain each time you go from one to the next. Like, I'll get on a roll where I'm making the work, and at the end of the roll, I'm moving so fast and everything's flowing so good that it's really kind of painful to jump off of it and then, I have to teach a class tomorrow, because it's like you're totally turning the car around. But it keeps things interesting, right? I mean, it's all of it's fun, and that's, I think, the point. So, and teaching, I love unlocking somebody's you know, I've had people that say I'm not creative, and I'm like, just watch. We'll put a torch in your hand, and you will be hooked forever. Brian calls it the gateway. So there we are.
Yeah. Sky?
Do you find yourself getting in the creative zone of a thing, in the sense of, I know musicians find the zone, sports people find the zone. As an editor, I know I get my head, my tools, and my time and the vision all finally aligned. Is that a part of this process that you're discovering?
Absolutely. The zone is like nirvana. It's any creative person, I think, that has experienced the zone knows that, in fact, that's probably why when I'm doing a show and I have to jump off of it, it's so painful, because you have to rip yourself out of the zone. And it's like it's a natural high, right? Yeah. So definitely there's a zone.
Do you feel like all the technology that we have around us, the notifications and little texts and everything else, make it harder to get that focus that you need?
I get really frustrated with it. Yeah, I used to have a part of my practice where I took a day where I just did, if anybody's read The Artist's Way, you take a day to actually feed the well. And I find that some of the technology, even though it affords us some great things to do and speeds up processes, it also can take you out of the moment really quickly, and that's a bummer.
I'm notorious, like all my devices are on do not disturb unless I open them. Like, so they're always just permanently on do not disturb unless I say, okay, I'm available at this period of time, because it's just, I find it impossible to think about important new things when people are constantly pinging me.
I'll have to try that, because it's like you're not using the rest of your brain.
Yeah, and you know, just about all my calls are scheduled because of that. Like I'm like, don't surprise me. Anyway, next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois is up next with, what's your pie in the sky dream project or dream creation?
Well, there we go back to our Bahamas project. So we mentioned the residency program a little bit that we actually do here in Maryland with SilverWorks. Ultimately, Brian and I bought property in one of the out islands of the Bahamas to implement a large project. And we have the buildings designed, it's ready to execute. We just are doing the funds, trying to get the funds together to actually build it, to create a destination place for people to come and do their craft. So it would represent numerous crafts. So it's a big, big deal dream. So unlike a piece of jewelry that's my ultimate dream, the bigger picture is that project. So yeah, it's sand and water and art, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to go. Now, how much are you trying to raise the money somewhere specific, or are you trying to?
Well, pandemic again put the hold on a lot of things for us, and that was me trying to just keep my business afloat at that moment. Right. So that I'm trying to get the engine started on that, and that's actually working really well. We will probably start setting our sights back on trying to do the fundraising for that project, and so right now it was sort of set aside a little bit, just for the time being.
Absolutely. I think we have the last question for the hour.
We do. It comes from Ron Myers in Bel Air, Maryland, and he says, do you shape first before fusing, or fuse something and then reduce it with saw or sander?
Oh, that's just brilliant. That's a good question that I have to, even when I'm teaching my students, what's the difference? Whenever you're fusing, you're changing the shape. You're ultimately, it's gonna change it and you lose control. So if you want a specific shape, like my Abbott Costello piece, I think I actually did saw some of that shape around for that piece. So for instance, if I wanted a perfect circle for something, I would do the fusion and then saw at the circle. Because if I did the circle and then fused it, it would all melt into something that wasn't the circle. So that's a great technical question about what happens to the metal, because it's unpredictable when you're fusing.
Now, one more question.
Yeah, we have a last one coming in from Chris Clark in Tempe, Arizona. He says, how high above sea level is your studio building in the Bahamas?
Yes, we took that into consideration. In fact, we had somebody on our board that had written some of the original documents about sea level rise, And so we did some homework on that because, Chris, great question. Yeah, that's sort of the concern right now. That and the hurricanes, we've had hurricane activity there, but we have designed buildings that are round, and so they actually repel the hurricane winds. So that we've taken a lot into consideration for some of those things. So good question, though. Awesome.
That's great. Blair, thank you so much for your time. It was fantastic.
It was my honor to be on. And do we have credits, Brian?
There's Brian.
Oh, we got to do credits first. He's gonna roll some credits because we have to thank everyone in office hours for getting me to this point and helping me out. So there have been a number of you that have contributed to this project without even realizing it. And I think we have credits. Okay, it's the last slide. Nope. There we go. They're in the bottom. There we go. So
that's great.
Thank you for your help, all of you, in all the different things. Yeah. So,
that's awesome.
So
Cute.
Yeah, but the Brian coming back. We'll get a full screen here.
Oh, there we go.
Nope. There we go. Come on back, hon. I got it. So thank you guys.
You so much. Just really, really amazing. It's an amazing setup. Your metalwork is really, really amazing to look at. And I just can't wait. Hopefully you'll use us as guinea pigs of online classes. I think we're known to accessorize. So, it's not out of the question for us to buy a couple of tools here and there so that we can keep up with the class. So
I would love to take advantage of that. So
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm in. So I would love to do it with you. So
awesome.
So this looks fantastic. So thanks again, Blair. Thanks for Brian for making all of this, pulling all this stuff together. Thank you to our producers, of course, that asked a lot of great questions and keeps the conversation going. And thanks to our panelists. We can't do this without you. And so thanks for all the great answers and great conversation. And a reminder, tomorrow we'll talk about office hours, where we're at and where we're going. And now we're going to jump into after hours. Stay tuned.